So we'll do 1, 2, 3 clap, and then we're in. Okay. So
yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Did you clap?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, good. Shall we start?
My arms were below.
This is very exciting. Now, this week, I'm joined by Kevin Toms. Now, well, shall we dive straight in to your part in gaming history? I know there's loads of other stuff that I want to talk about, but let's just set the scene. Your part in gaming history, it is a significant part in gaming history.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was way back in the early days when there wasn't even a shop selling computer games. Everything was like a hobby industry where you had to sell everything by mail order. And I wrote a game which I kind of had an interest in for a long time called Football Manager, the original Football Manager game. And when I brought that out in 1982,
wow.
Having written it in 1981 in Milton Keynes, in a flat in Milton Keynes.
Unlucky. I've worked in Milton Keynes. I know it.
Well, this was Milton Keynes was still being built then, I started selling it myself by mail order. I basically had written it for interest and because I thought it'd be good, and friends were playing it and they got very hooked on it, and I realized I had something I could sell, spotted the market, and started selling by mail order with a quarter-page ad in Computer and Video Games magazine. But it was the very first football management game, or game of that type.
There will be people, under a certain age who will not believe that one person could do everything. Nowadays, games take 10, 15 years. There's hundreds of people working on it. You get some smaller indie games where it's a handful. But back in the day, 1982, the early 80s, it was really common for one person to write the game and then one person to market it and sell it. And were you sending out the cassettes yourself?
Yeah, I was making them. I was actually, if you know, back then, they were audio tapes, which you recorded off the computer onto an audio tape. Yeah. And I literally, when I was preparing to do the advertising and sell the game, I got some simple packaging made with inlay and some instructions. And I bought 300 C60, they were C60s, I think, cassettes from Tandy's at a discount. And I was recording them myself. And I used to be sitting in the lounge watching TV. And because it made a noise, and it took about 10 minutes or so, I can't remember, maybe even 15 minutes, I could hear when it ended and switch over to make the next one. So I was literally doing the manufacturing as well.
Can I ask how old you were?
I was 24.
Oh, okay. That was because there were kids doing that stuff around then as well, like teenagers. Well, what computer were you writing them on?
I wrote originally on the TRS-80 clone, the Video Genie.
Okay, that's
what I wrote it first on. I got it all running on that. But then a few months before in the end of 1981, the ZX81 came out, and I got one of those. And I thought this is potentially an important market because of the price point. It was £99.
Yeah,
and so it was much cheaper. And it was a very, very wise decision because of when I started selling in the new year, of the first 300 I sold, 297 were ZX81 versions and 3 on the TRS-80 Video Genie. And if I hadn't done the ZX81 version, I wouldn't have been able to pay for the advertising.
Yeah,
because that was about £100 for each ad.
What were you doing before that? What was young Kevin Toms up to?
Well, that was where it's a funny thing, because the way I started is so different to so many, because many of them, they got a hold of a home computer and started learning to program it and then wrote games. So they learned on the home computers. But I was already a professional programmer. I'd been working on mainframes in COBOL and things like that for a few years at that point. And I was actually at that time when I started, I was actually working at the Open University in Milton Keynes doing COBOL programming, I think.
Right. So why again? What was the thought process where you went, I'm going to sit down, I've got an idea, I'm going to sit down at a computer and write all of this out?
Well, it really came because I was inventing games as a hobby as like a teenager, young teenager from about 10, 12 years old. I started playing around with writing, games, making up games, board games, of course, then. And games with the ball in the street, tennis ball or football, just inventing new games. So they used to, in fact, there's one that people used to play quite a lot, a simple football game with a football, just throwing. It called throw ball. I invented it. You had to throw the ball and try and bounce it off the edge of the curb opposite, where there wasn't so many cars, so it was less dangerous. And loads of people used to play that.
We used to call that curbsies where we were. That was curbsies.
Well, I invented it.
That's fantastic. How many of those tapes did you post out?
When it was mail order, it was hundreds. Because, I can remember a point where I was going across the road in Milton Keynes to the post office to send them out in jiffy bags. And there was one day, obviously later on in the year, where I'd got so many that I was carrying 92 of them to the post office that day. And the guy behind the counter, who was, oh my God, I've got to deal with these, stamp these all individually. He said, if you got, he'd seen me come in a number of times, of course, as well. He said, if you got this many, he said, well, come and collect them. And I said, you will? I had no idea, completely innocent to this stuff. And then after that, they used to call at my little flat and collect the games from me, which I was making. So,
you must have been surprised by the success of it, because Football Manager was huge. I grew up with the Dragon 32. I had a BBC Micro, and I really disliked football. I disliked football. However, I would go around to my friend's house and we would play Football Manager together, because actually you could see it as a football game. You could also see it as kind of like a trading game, a stats game as well, which I was really into. Yeah. So when it became that big, how did you react?
I was just doing it just day to day. It was just changing. I was adapting all the time. So, it started off, it was just by post mail order. In fact, when I say about Milton Keynes, that actually got to a point where I'd already, they were building some offices down the road. Everything's being built in Milton Keynes. They're building some new office block, and I'd registered for one. And suddenly thought, oh no, I'm going to be, once I get an office and staff and that, I'm going to be in Milton Keynes. That's where I am. And I never saw myself as permanently there. I mean, I grew up by the beach in Torquay, and I was missing being closer to the ocean. And so I decided I've got to move now before I build this up. And that's how I relocated to Bournemouth. And then it grew there. So it started off in Milton Keynes. It was all me. And then when I went down to Bournemouth, I started recruiting staff, and it started to grow. But it was really just dealing with like things as they happened, like suddenly bigger sales. When WH Smith made their big order in the autumn, I knew I couldn't make 2,000 games myself. And so I had to get a manufacturer. Luckily, there was a company that started manufacturing games at that point, because there were plenty of people who could duplicate audio cassettes, but they couldn't make them right for games. They wouldn't load. So it was a specialist that just one company did at first, until others learned how to do it.
Were you a gamer, or were you purely a programmer?
I used to like playing games, but I find the writing of them more fun.
Now, for those who don't know, I'm ADHD. I got diagnosed. I'm 50. I got diagnosed about 2 years ago. Completely changed my life. Suddenly, it made sense of, I used to be called thick and naughty at school by the teachers, because I just couldn't. I'd go in a classroom and go, right, I'm really going to focus. And within 5 minutes, I'm bouncing off the wall. The ADHD has explained that. It's explained why I'm not particularly great at relationships, in part. And it's a really big part of my life, and something I talk about a lot. And we've been emailing each other, Kevin, and you're ADHD.
I can't believe it.
You still there? Just as we're getting to the good stuff, you're back.
Yeah, we just got a glitch. That's unbelievable.
Sorry, glitches are okay. You're ADHD. Tell me a bit about when you got diagnosed and what that was like for you.
Absolutely, a major revelation, and has changed a lot of things. I got diagnosed only about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people that were diagnosed not as children but late in adulthood end up experiencing, I almost swore then, try not to swear, why didn't I know before? It would have changed so many things.
Yeah.
I've done so many things differently. I know some people even get quite grief struck by that. I haven't, because I feel glad that I was diagnosed, because everything has changed for the better since. It's made my life much more stable, and things that just much more stable and progressive rather than erratic, because there's an erraticness or impulsiveness, and there's many consequences. And now I don't have those problems anymore. I can still feel the symptoms sometimes, but I can recognize them.
This is too personal, then tell me to jog on. Are you taking medication for it?
Yeah, I take medication, and I don't mind talking about it, because that in itself, in fact, I've learned a lot about it. And one of the things is it's one of the most, in terms of medication for a condition like this, it's one of the most effective medications, for things that affect you psychologically. So I do, and it's very effective.
I tried the medication. It didn't. I'm a recovering drug addict, and there was just something about taking something that was amphetamine based that it just made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I tried it. It didn't work for me, and I'm a big advocate of coping techniques, coming up with ways to make things more productive. And I'm kind of jealous of people like you where it has worked. I know so many people who have gone, oh my God, once I started taking the meds, everything changed. How has the medication affected your life for the better?
More calm.
Right.
That's the odd thing, because it's a stimulant, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it seems to work the other way. It doesn't, coffees affect me more in that way. But concentration, focus, patience, like being able to listen to people better, not interrupting. I've talked to other people who've been diagnosed, and they said, what about the medication? I said, you'll be interrupting people less. I said, that's one of the things that comes out of it, and you'll listen better. For me, it's like changed what was like I always describe as a kind of zigzag life to a more of a steady progression, and getting things done better.
The listening is a tough. For 20 years, I was a phone-in radio host, and my job was to talk. And if I didn't talk, I wouldn't get paid. Now I've retrained as a counselor, as a therapist. And the most important thing I had to learn was to shut up and to listen. Instead of the head going off, thinking about what's the difference between an African and an Indian elephant or whatever. How old was George Harrison when he left the Beatles? He was 27. Instead of doing that, when I'm sat with a client, I have to be present and I have to listen. And I've taught myself for the hour, I can do that. And then after the hour, I kind of have to shake it all out. But that was a big thing for me, was I would not be listening to what someone was saying to me. I would be thinking what the next thing I was going to say was. And people would notice it. They would think it was rude. They would think I wasn't paying attention. But it was just how I was wired. So being able to listen to someone and respond to it is a big thing to learn.
I think that there's this thing that happens is that your mind makes a lot of fast connections, and things trigger. So there's like lots of patterns. I don't know whether it's because of ADHD. I think it might be. So like when somebody says something, you think, there's something good I want to say about that. That's really good. And then the other thing I believe is that because that if you don't do it right away, you'll forget it, and you'll lose this great thing that you've just come up with. You want to say it straight away. Now, to you, that's because you're excited about it and because you think it's really worthwhile. And it can mean you're great company because you can be very stimulating and jokey and fun and everything. But the other person can perceive it as not allowing them to speak, and you don't know you're doing it. And I think that can be very easily misread.
I have the greatest thing I ever did. You can't quite see it here, but I stuck a whiteboard up next to the computer. So if I'm doing something online, or if I'm working with a client sometimes, and an idea comes, just write it up on there. Now, most of it, I don't remember what any of it means. However, the simple act, this is one of my coping mechanisms, the simple act of writing something down can be enough just to get it out, or as a reminder of something that I want to look up or investigate further. How are you with the ADHD tax, the buying stuff, starting new hobbies, and then when it comes going, what did I buy that for? You any good with that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think the other things, if I was to say what shows looking back as well, is the fact that I've lived in 7 countries and I can remember moving 14 times in 10 years.
Wow.
And I also spent a long time as a contractor, an independent contractor. That suited me because I would change jobs quite regularly every few months. But staying long term in a permanent job, I mean, when somebody described that, there's a friend of mine, he worked 4.5 years with one company. And I said, what are you doing? And he described it. And I said, that's really boring. I said, how do you cope with that? He said, well, they're paying me. Yeah, and I just thought, no, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it. I just wouldn't be able to do it, even though they're paying me well. I mean, I just would need change, need some stimulation.
Move 14 times. Moving is my literal nightmare. I have nightmares that I have to be out of a house within an hour and I've got to pack everything. But you enjoy the moves?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's just there's always a reason. There's always a justification. Like that. I'm doing it for a purpose. But when looking back at it, and with moving countries as well, that part of it as well. But looking back at it, I thought that was a lot in a short time. Yeah. And I think that's just one of you might say a symptom, but you don't know it's a symptom.
Yeah,
because you're too clever at coming up with reasons why you're doing what you're doing, when it's really need for. I did think actually that I was getting, because of the need for stimulation, I was getting the benefit of having to start somewhere new all the time, having to deal with fresh challenges all the time, and that was something I wanted. But yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned the jobs. I hadn't considered that. When I worked in TV, the most you work on a job in TV is 3 months, and then you're off to something else. And you've reminded me, I trained to be an actor. I went to university and did performing arts, and the plan was to become an actor. And we'd have to do shows there. And quite often we would do the shows 4 times. And by the 3rd time, I was so bored of doing saying the same words again. It was almost physically painful having to repeat that. And I was so scared when I was young. I grew up in Slough, and we were trained in the school, basically to go into the Slough trading estate and work in offices. No disrespect to anyone who's worked in an office. I've done it. I used to get so depressed and scared, Kevin, that would be my life because of the boredom, the repetition. I couldn't handle that. And it's really interesting that you bring that up as something.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. I can also remember I worked at, I was doing a job at Torbay Borough Council in Torquay, and I met a guy, and he was working in the rates department, and he said, he was only in his 30s, I think, maybe late 30s or something. He said, I've been here for 16 years, he said, and everything he emanated was he didn't like his job. And I can remember I was only like 18 or something like that at the time. I thought of that as complete nightmare life, like I couldn't imagine that, so it's like how you judge it. Because I mean, other people might say, oh, that's very stable, and predictable, and they might like that. Yeah. But to me, that seemed like alarming and really feeling like dying. I would felt like I died if I was him.
How are you with noise? One of the things that used to be a joke between me and my partner is if we're in a restaurant or at a party, I can't hear what the person opposite me is saying because of the hubbub. I can't separate the noise. It's just one thing. And we used to joke about it. And then I got diagnosed and read a book, and it said that is a thing that some people who have ADHD struggle with, is separation of noise. How are you with sound and noise?
I have a different version of it.
Okay.
I actually find the complete silence a problem.
Right.
And so one of the things I do, which people don't understand, is I often, like I work on software, and I often like to do that in a cafe.
Right.
I'm struggling because I want to say coffee shop, and that means something else here.
You're in Amsterdam, by the way. We should.
Yeah,
that's
say. Right.
Yes.
That's right. I mean, Amsterdam, and coffee shop is a different meaning. I would have normally said coffee shop. And the very fact that there are people moving around and there's stuff going on is relaxing for me, and it doesn't distract me at all.
Yeah.
It gives me focus, in fact, and silence makes me restless.
Right.
So like sitting in a quiet room, well, it's more likely to make me restless if I don't have some noise on. So I have a different way of reaction. It is reacting, but it's reacting preferring stimulation as background.
What do you have? Do you have to have the radio on to fall asleep?
No.
You can do that silence.
I've got a good mastery of that now. Yeah.
Okay.
I've become very good at sleep, actually. Yeah.
Really?
Years of practice. Yeah.
What
Years of practice of sleeping. That sounds
what
good,
were you like at school? How looking back, and you talked about the grief. I run some ADHD workshops as well, and you're right. The grief that people look back and see, perhaps wasted opportunities, wasted relationships.
Yes.
When you look back at your school years, how do you feel about that, and what were you like?
School was tough for me. I don't know how much I was affected. I mean, I would have been affected. It must have affected me. But I was quite, people find this very hard to understand if they meet me now, but I was a particularly shy person when I was at school. I had, very little self-confidence. I think I felt different. I think that was, I felt abnormal, so I was, but I mean, it was like a different experience at school, really.
I've heard it described by people, and this fits perfectly, that it's like they missed the day or the week at school where people were taught how to have small talk and how to socialize properly. Because I have struggled with small talk my whole life. Again, I'm really, really shy. And, you look back at my CV, you can't be. I've had to learn the script for small talk because I don't know how you do it. So I've learned that you ask people how they are, you ask people how their family are, you ask them what they do for a living. I've had to learn that. And I watch people at parties, and I don't really go to parties, but I watch other people interacting and meeting people and think, how do they do that? How are they not completely clenched up in terror and completely uncomfortable feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I have different challenges there in that I can't. They'll tell me everything about themselves, and then I won't remember it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, here's the one. How are you with faces and names? Do you recognize faces? Can you remember names?
I've actually it's like all my problems, but I was listening to Emily Maitlis on a podcast earlier on.
Yeah.
And she suffers from the same thing as I do, facial blindness.
Yeah.
That's a huge challenge. So I can't recognize people until I've seen them a few times. And so it helps if they're wearing a name badge or something. But I don't know. I would think it's unrelated, but it's remembering someone's name very hard as well.
It is common with ADHD. I think it's called prosopagnosia or something, the facial blindness. I have it.
Okay.
I now have learned. I used to say, "Oh, nice to meet you," and people would say, "Oh, we worked together 6 months ago," and it can come across as arrogant. So now I've learned the line of, "Have we met? We've met, haven't we?" And then if you're right, fantastic, and if you're wrong, you look like a slightly bumbling thing. But I do think it is part of ADHD. Certainly is for a lot of people I've worked with.
Oh, okay, that's very interesting because I mean, I didn't know there was a link, but yeah, it's a real problem because, you might have spent quite some time talking to someone and they meet you again and they recognize you immediately and you're thinking, I can't think who this person is.
Yeah.
I know I sort of know I've met them before, but that's all I remember. I can't remember the context, can't remember the name, and they might have spent quite a bit of time with you. It's very annoying. So that's where it's socially very, very problematic, isn't it? Because you feel like you're being rude, and it's kind of worse for me as well because I'm 6'5", and so distinct looking as well. So people always remember me because I'm so tall. And I always say I wish they would all have different color hair or something like that, so I can remember the person with the blue hair. So
it's interesting you mentioned being recognized. Going back to the game, because you brilliantly, this is a stroke of genius, you put your face on the cover of the game, Kevin Tom's Football Manager, and there's a picture of you, big bushy hair, big beard. I don't think that had ever been done before on a game.
And I thought it was very predictable at the time, because what was happening was, I'd written the game and I was selling it by mail order, and I started attending computer game shows, and there was one or two game shows I went to, and I was talking to people about the game, and they were people who played it, they were actually played it, and then they'd say something, and I say, the reason I did that, it was because of so and so, and they say, what, you wrote the game? And I said, yeah. And they thought I was a salesman. So so I said, yeah. And then they got really animated and everything and started asking me a lot more. And I thought, well, hang on, this is, although I'm selling this thing in a cassette, it's my design, my way of writing it. And obviously I just saw an analogy with music and books. I just thought, nobody cares what record label a band is on. It's the band you like because you like the style of music. The same with an author of books. You like the way he wrote that book. You'd like to buy another book by him. And I thought, surely computer games is the same, especially as I'd written it entirely myself as well. And I thought that way people will know it's mine. And also I'm, in a way, giving credibility to it. Say, I'm prepared to put my name to this game. I think it's good. And luckily, it was good.
It was very good. Very good. I met you very briefly at a kind of a retro gaming. I've just dived back into the retro gaming thing after flirting on the fringes. Met you very briefly at an event in somewhere West London, something like that. And you go to these events and give talks, and then people come up and ask for photos and get you to sign their copy of Football Manager. That's incredible that 40 years later, your game and so many of those games still stand the test of time and have a huge following. I imagine that's very flattering for you. Yeah,
and it was like, I knew the game so well. I knew people liked it. But it was really the age of the internet that really brought that back to me, because people, I was online and people started contacting me and talking to me about playing my game and everything. And I realized more and more that it was more than just a game, that it had a big impact on people's lives and part of their lives in the same way as, music is. And, it's part of a cultural kind of thing, is to play a lot with their friends. Of course, more than a song, you don't play it for 12 hours, the same song, but they do play games and play with their friends, like you said, with your friends as well. So it's a social thing as well. Yeah. And, I'm appreciative of that, and I like people. So it's nice to do that and talk about it as well.
Going back to the ADHD, for those that know, one of the many great things about ADHD is the hyperfocus, and it's where our brains and our focus can zoom in on one thing, and we can do it 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. I'm so lucky. Yeah. If my partner phones up when I'm in a hyperfocus, I just say, "Can't talk now, hyperfocus," and she brilliantly goes, "Give me a call when it's done." Now, for the most part, for me, it's cable management. It's tidying up. It quite often it involves tidying, and I'm really hoping I get it soon for the garage because I need to work on that. But it can be work, it can be writing, it can be podcasting, it can be streaming. And I'm wondering, looking back, was hyperfocus, did that play a part in you writing the game?
Yeah, I think it always has. I think I certainly experience it now still. and I love it actually. But yeah, no, I get lost. I mean, writing software, and still writing the new games today. I do experience that. I think in the last week I did, when I was in the cafe, and for about 4.5 hours, I think I was there.
Yeah.
Working away, just got interrupted for lunch. But I would have happily carried on for the rest of the afternoon.
It's a great feeling when you're locked in it.
It's peaceful.
Really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing else matters. And of course, all that's going on around me, but I don't notice.
Yeah.
So yeah. And yeah, it's not good if you're trying to monitor something. But if it doesn't matter, it's great. It's great. Yeah.
What happened with Football Manager, huge success. Football Manager 2, what was the progress?
Football Manager 2 was very successful actually, but it wasn't so pleasant for me to do. It was the #1 seller for 3 months continuously. Wow. And sold lots of games. But the experience of writing it, where I was no longer, writing all, just on my own. I had a team of guys doing graphics all around the country, and it was a more stressful experience. But so I produced a good game, but I don't feel it the same way as I feel the original one, writing of the original one.
Looking back on all the games, the way the business progressed, would you have done anything differently, do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Go on. What would you have done?
Well, hindsight is 20/20 vision. Actually, been talking about ADHD. It might have affected the way I was making decisions, because the most pure, the most obvious thing I would do now, and I would probably think of it that way now, is that I would, because Football Manager, the original Football Manager, was successful, I would think, okay, how can I incrementally develop that further? But I switched to doing other things. I switched to doing another game about software, which was a good game, and I did a president, and then eventually, not until I'd sold the company did I get back to Football Manager 2. So I would have just carried on a steady progression, and not think I need to do something completely different, which is the kind of way I was reacting at the time, and that would have been a better choice. The one bit of information I was lacking, which would have helped me, is that now with the internet, you can get direct communication back. Then all I would get was the occasional letters or meet somebody at a show.
Yeah,
the sales were there, but I didn't get that sort of so much of the sense of what it was meaning to people and how committed they were to the game, and what their thoughts were about the game, like I might do now, where they say, could we have this? Could we have that? Is this possible? Is that not possible? But that was just when it wasn't available to me at that time anyway. Didn't have that information. So that would have affected my thinking as well. Yeah.
Still writing games? I have a Kevin Tom's Football Manager on my phone. Is that the most recent?
Yeah. That is. So what I did there was, a few years ago, I was in Canada at the time, one of my travels, and I put out online, I said, I do mobile software, for iOS and Android, and I could rewrite my original game for mobiles. Anybody interested? And I got a very positive reaction. And so I started on it, and then I spent, I think it was about 18 months in total writing that. And then it was basically a complete fresh write of the original Football Manager game, but for mobiles. So it is a very strong retro feel. It has, the gameplay is very, very close, but I didn't need to look at the code or anything in the original. I just wrote it from scratch because I knew how it played, and I've enhanced it a bit. And people play it a lot. They literally play hundreds of seasons on that game. And then it just got to a point a few years back, or a couple of years back now, where people were starting to ask for more features. I was adding some, which I felt were worth it. And then I said, look, if I start adding that kind of feature, I'm changing the game. Do you want me to do that? And the general response, most people said, no, it's kind of a classic design. Keep that. No, don't do that. I said, well, I'm going to start a new project then. So that's what the other football management game I do is it's called Kevin Todd's Football Game at the moment. And that's one thing I found was because of all the different football type games, putting my name on the front, funny enough, it kind of links right back to doing it in the origin when I did it the first time, is the best way for people to find my games. So, when they look for Kevin Toms on the App Store, they can find App Stores, they can find my game. So this one, though, that I'm writing now, I've got a released version. It's like a minimum viable game that's on the App Stores. It's free to download, and it's advertising supported. But I've got another version, like the next version in the works, and I'm deciding at the moment whether to release that interim version or do a kind of a version 2 in the new year in January, probably. But it's evolving nicely, that game, and that's a long-term evolution product. So like I'll keep the straightforward gameplay that I do. I'm not going to add lots and lots of statistics or anything like that, because that's for someone else to do. But I focus on the gameplay and the fun and the pick up and play. I mean, one of the things that got me to do it was people who used to play my original game say they don't want the big complex stuff, that the other football manager might say is now. They said because they haven't got the time, and they just need something they can just play and get back to. But of course, you get the save game, so you can always continue from where you left off. So the Football Style Manager, or Kevin Todd's Football Manager, is a rewrite. Kevin Todd's Football Game is a new evolution.
Kevin, we're done. I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on this, and also thank you for writing those games, for making Football Manager back in the early 80s, because I had so much fun playing it. Say, I'm not a football fan, didn't like it, but I had so much fun playing that game. And also you guys, you were the pioneers of video game making. You helped shape the industry. You helped make home computers what they were. If there weren't people like you turning out games of that quality, it could have gone a different way. So thank you so much, Kevin, for everything you've done. It's really appreciated.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, we weren't thinking about movie licenses or anything like that. We were just thinking of those days of how to write another good game. And I think that was a good drive we had in those early days.
Fantastic. It's really nice to meet you properly.
All right.
Hello. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast, watching the video. This is all made possible by my fantastic Patreons, and we've had a really big influx of people signing up over the last month or so. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So without further ado, here are my mighty Patreons. Harsh Singh, salute. Sam Hughes, salute. Craig Hannon, you get the peace sign. And Martin Warren, you get a thumbs up. However, I also have executive producers. They get their name flashed upon the screen if you're watching the video version of this. So as always, Matt Stanley Evans, thank you so much for your support and for your emails. I always enjoy reading them. Mark Gidley, thank you for becoming an executive producer. And also at Woodpunk. All of the executive producers get this cat absolutely free. Of course you don't. It's Patty. No one gets that cat. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to find out more, if you want to support the show, you want to get the show a couple of weeks ahead of everyone else, go to patreon.com/Iain Lee. That's patreon.com/IAINLEE. Thank you.